Admiral Zextara stood on the bridge of the Starlight Defender and watched another world die. Through the large viewing screen, she could see the green planet Meloria burning. Orange and red flames covered its surface like angry scars. The beautiful forests and blue oceans that once made this world home to 40 million Kaleri were now gone forever. "Admiral, we are getting the last evacuation ships," said Commander Veltar from his station. His voice was quiet and sad. "Only 200,000 made it out." Zexthara closed her 4 eyes for a moment. 200,000 survivors from 40 million people. The numbers always hurt to hear? She had been fighting this war for 3 years now, and every battle ended the same way. The Vorthak came, they consumed everything, and the Kaleri ran. "How long until the Vorthak reach the next system?" she asked. "Our scouts say maybe 2 weeks, Admiral. They are moving faster now." The Admiral looked at the tactical display floating above the command table. Red dots showed where the Vorthak forces were moving through their space. Blue dots showed what was left of the Kaleri fleet. There were far more red dots than blue ones. The Vorthak were not like any enemy the Kaleri had ever fought before. Most wars in the galaxy happened between different species who wanted the same planets or resources. Those wars had rules. They had limits. When one side won, the other side could surrender and make peace. But the Vorthak did not want peace. They did not want to rule over other species. They wanted to eat them. Every living thing on every planet they conquered became food for their biomechanical ships. They turned entire worlds into giant factories that made more weapons and more soldiers. Zexthara remembered the first time she had seen a Vorthak ship up close. It was 3 years ago, during the Battle of Zarium Prime. The ship looked like a massive insect made of metal and flesh. It had thousands of small holes all over its surface, and from these holes came smaller ships that looked like flying beetles. The big ship itself was alive in some horrible way. It breathed. It bled when it was damaged, and when it was hurt badly enough, it would eat its own smaller ships to heal itself. The worst part was how smart they were. Every time the Kaleri used a weapon against them, the Vorthak learned to defend against it. Energy weapons that worked perfectly in one battle would be useless in the next battle. The enemy ships would grow new armor that could absorb the energy blasts. They could change their shape to avoid missiles. They could even copy Kaleri technology and use it against them. "Admiral, we have an urgent message from the High Command," said Lieutenant Karras from the communications station. "Put it through." The viewing screen changed to show the face of General Morduk, the leader of all Kaleri military forces. He looked older than when Zexthara had seen him last month. The war was aging all of them quickly. "Admiral Zexthara, you need to return to the capital immediately. We are calling all fleet commanders for an emergency meeting." "General, my ships are needed here to cover the evacuation from Meloria." "The evacuation is finished, Admiral." "There is no one left to save on that world." The general's voice was heavy with sadness. "We have bigger problems now. Our intelligence division has discovered something terrible about the Vorthak's next move." Zexthara felt cold fear in her stomach. "What have they found?" "Not over this channel, Admiral. Just come home as fast as you can. And Zexthara, bring every ship you have. We may not get another chance to gather our forces like this." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Zexthara knew that tone in the general's voice. She had heard it before when they first learned that the Vorthak had destroyed the outer colonies. It was the sound of someone delivering very bad news. "Commander Veltar, signal all ships in the fleet. We are returning to Kaleri Prime immediately." "Yes, Admiral." "Should I tell them why?" "Tell them we have new orders from High Command, nothing more." As her ships prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Zexthara looked one last time at the burning planet below. Meloria had been one of the most beautiful worlds in Kaleri space. Her sister had lived there with her family before the war started. They had escaped during one of the earlier evacuations, but millions of others had not been so lucky. The stars stretched into long white lines as the Starlight Defender entered hyperspace. The journey to Kaleri Prime would take 6 hours, Zexthara used that time to review the latest battle reports from other parts of the war. The news was all bad. Admiral Kikalan had lost half his fleet trying to defend the industrial world of Factory 7. The Vorthak had completely destroyed the mining colonies in the Outer Rim. Worst of all, the defensive fleet protecting the agricultural worlds had been wiped out completely. Those worlds grew most of the food for the civilian population. By Zexthara's count, the Kaleri had lost over 60% of their military ships in the last 3 years. They had lost even more civilian ships trying to evacuate refugees from conquered worlds. At this rate, they would have no ships left within a year, but the ships were not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem was that they were running out of places to run to. The Vorthak had conquered or destroyed over 200 Kaleri worlds. Each conquered world gave the enemy more resources to build more ships and more soldiers. The Kaleri had maybe 50 worlds left under their control. When the fleet arrived at Kaleri Prime, Zexthara could see that the homeworld was preparing for siege. Huge defense platforms had been built in orbit around the planet. The space around the world was full of military ships, supply vessels, and refugee transports from dozens of other worlds. The admiral took a shuttle down to the surface and went straight to the military headquarters in the capital city of New Kalara. The building was buzzing with activity. Officers and soldiers hurried through the hallways carrying data tablets and battle plans. Everyone looked worried and tired. The emergency meeting was held in the same room where the Kaleri Confederation had declared war on the Vorthak 3 years ago. All the surviving fleet commanders were there, along with government officials and military leaders. Zexthara counted only 12 other admirals in the room. At the start of the war, there had been 35. General Morduk stood at the front of the room next to a large holographic display. "Thank you all for coming. I know you have left your fleets at a critical time, but what I am about to tell you affects the survival of our entire species." He activated the display, which showed a map of Vorthak movements over the last month. "Our intelligence teams have intercepted enemy communications. We have learned that the Vorthak are gathering their forces for what they call the final consumption. They are bringing together every ship in their empire for one massive attack." Admiral Tekron, who commanded the defense of the northern sectors, raised his hand. "How many ships are we talking about, General?" "According to our best estimates, over 1 million vessels of various sizes." The room fell completely silent. Zexthara felt sick. 1 million ships. The entire remaining Kaleri fleet had maybe 8,000 ships, and most of those were damaged or low on supplies. "When will this attack begin?" asked Admiral Yansara. "Our sources suggest they will be ready to move in approximately 6 months. They are taking time to bring ships from the far edges of their territory and to build new vessels using the resources from recently conquered worlds." Commander Poltek from the Intelligence Division stepped forward. "We believe their target is Kaleri Prime itself. They want to end this war by destroying our homeworld and the government." Zexthara stood up. "General, with respect, how are we supposed to fight 1 million ships with 8,000? Even if we gathered every civilian vessel we could find, we would still be outnumbered more than 50 to 1. That is exactly the question we need to answer in this meeting, Admiral. Our scientists, our military strategists, and our political leaders have been working around the clock to find some way to survive this attack. We need ideas, we need miracles. We need anything that might give us a chance." For the next several hours, the room filled with desperate suggestions. Some commanders wanted to scatter the fleet and try to hide on remote worlds until the Vorthak moved on to other parts of the galaxy. Others suggested trying to negotiate with the enemy. Though everyone knew the Vorthak did not negotiate with food, a few officers proposed using weapons of mass destruction against Vorthak worlds. But those weapons had already been tried early in the war. The Vorthak ships simply absorbed the energy from nuclear explosions and used it to make themselves stronger. The most popular suggestion was to evacuate as many civilians as possible to the unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim and hope that some Kaleri would survive to rebuild their civilization someday. As the meeting continued into the night, Zexthara realized that none of these plans would really work. The Vorthak were too strong, too adaptable, and too numerous. They had been winning this war since the first day, and nothing the Kaleri had tried had been able to stop them. "There is one more option we have not discussed," said Dr. Linara, the head of the science division. "We could try to find allies." General Mordek shook his head. "Doctor, we have already contacted every major civilization in this part of the galaxy. The Zelkin Republic is too far away to help in time. The unified worlds are fighting their own war against the Machine Collective. The Stellar Federation has closed their borders and refuses to get involved." "I was not talking about the major civilizations, General. I was talking about the small ones. The species we have not contacted because we thought they were too primitive to matter. What could primitive species do against the Vorthak that we cannot do ourselves?" "I do not know," Dr. Linara admitted. "But we have exhausted all other possibilities. Maybe someone out there has something we do not. Maybe someone has developed weapons or strategies that we have never considered," Admiral Zexthara thought about this idea as the meeting finally ended near dawn. It was a desperate plan, but then again, they were in a desperate situation. As she walked back to her shuttle, she looked up at the sunrise over Kaleri Prime. It was beautiful, but she wondered how many more sunrises her people would see. 6 months. That was all the time they had left to find a miracle. 6 months, too. Discover something that could stop an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. 6 months to save their entire species from extinction. The Admiral climbed into her shuttle and prepared to return to her fleet. There was still work to do, still worlds to evacuate, still battles to fight. But now she also had a new mission. She would start looking for allies in the most unlikely places. After all, when you are about to lose everything, even the smallest hope is worth pursuing. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency meeting on Kaleri Prime. Admiral Zexthara sat in her command chair aboard the Starlight Defender, reading through the latest reports from the search teams. Dr. Linara's suggestion to contact primitive species had been approved by the High Command, but the results so far were disappointing. The science teams had found dozens of small civilizations scattered throughout the outer regions of the galaxy. Most of them were still using chemical rockets to travel between planets in their own star systems. A few had developed basic energy weapons, but nothing that could challenge even the weakest Vorthak scout ship. Commander Veltar approached her chair with another data tablet. "Admiral, we have responses from the contact teams in sectors 7 through 12. The Brolin species offered to share their agricultural knowledge with us. The Qatari want to trade their art for our medical technology. The Yilians asked if we could help them build better space stations." Zexthara rubbed her forehead with 2 of her hands. "None of them understand what we are facing, do they?" "No, Admiral. Most of them have never fought a war beyond their own star system. They cannot imagine an enemy like the Vorthak." "Any word from the teams in the Outer Rim sectors?" "Still waiting for reports from sectors 15 through 20. Those regions are so far out that it takes 3 days for messages to reach us." The Admiral looked at the tactical display showing Vorthak movements. The enemy was still gathering their forces for the final attack, but they were also sending scout fleets to probe Kaleri defenses. Every week brought news of another skirmish, another lost battle, another retreat. Lieutenant Kiris turned from her communications station. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority transmission from Contact Team Gamma in Sector 18. Put it through." The main screen showed Captain Morjan, one of the expedition leaders. He looked excited, which was unusual. Most of the contact team reports had been routine and boring. "Admiral, we have found something interesting. We encountered a species that calls themselves humans. They are from a star system called Sol, and they want to meet with our command structure." "What makes them different from the other species we have contacted?" "Well, Admiral, they contacted us first. Our scout ship was investigating their system when they sent armed vessels to intercept us. When we explained our situation, they immediately offered to help." Zexthara was surprised. Most primitive species were afraid when they first met advanced aliens. Armed vessels? What kind of weapons do they have? That is the strange part, Admiral. Their weapons are very primitive. They use solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Their ships have no energy shields. They do not even have faster-than-light communication systems. But they seem very confident about their military abilities. How confident can they be with such old technology? They claim to be experienced. Fighters, Admiral. They said they have been fighting wars for their entire history as a species. They also said something else that was interesting. What was that? They said they specialize in fighting enemies who think they are unbeatable. Commander Veltar leaned closer to the Admiral. It sounds like they do not understand what they would be facing. Maybe, said Zexthara, but we are running out of options. Captain Morjan, arrange a meeting. I want to see these humans for myself. Yes, Admiral. They suggested meeting at the edge of their star system. They said they prefer to conduct important meetings in neutral space. Very well. Send them the coordinates for a rendezvous point. We will meet them in 2 days. 2 days later, the Starlight Defender arrived at the meeting coordinates along with 3 other Kaleri ships. The human fleet that was waiting for them was small but organized. Zexthara counted 8 vessels, each about half the size of a Kaleri cruiser. Their ships look very basic, observed Commander Veltar. I am not detecting any energy signatures that suggest advanced weapon systems. What about their defenses? They appear to have some kind of metal armor plating, but no energy shields. Admiral, a single blast from our main cannon could destroy one of their ships. The Admiral studied the human vessels through the viewing screen. They had a rough, practical design that reminded her of the first ships her own people had built thousands of years ago. But there was something about the way they moved that suggested their crews knew what they were doing. Incoming transmission from the lead human ship, announced Lieutenant Kiris. Put it through. The screen showed a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. She had short, dark hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the Kaleri Bridge. When she spoke, her voice was calm and confident. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force vessel Resilience. I speak for the United Earth Government in this matter. I am Admiral Zexthara of the Kaleri Confederation. Captain Chun, my people are grateful for your willingness to meet with us. Admiral, our preliminary discussions with your contact team were quite concerning. You are facing an enemy that has conquered hundreds of worlds and is planning to attack your homeworld with over 1 million ships. That is correct, Captain. The Vorthic Empire has been expanding across this part of the galaxy for several years. They consume everything in their path. Captain Chun was quiet for a moment, and Zexthara could see her thinking carefully. Admiral, I need to be honest with you. Humanity has never fought a space war on this scale. Our conflicts have been limited to our own star system and a few nearby regions. Commander Veltar whispered to the Admiral. They are admitting they cannot help us. But Captain Chun continued speaking. However, we have been monitoring Vorthak movements at the edge of their territory. They have sent scout fleets to investigate our system several times in the past month. You have encountered Vorthak forces? Zexthara was surprised. Most primitive species would have been destroyed immediately. Yes, Admiral. Small groups of their bioships have probed our defenses 3 times. Each time we have managed to drive them away. You drove away Vorthak scouts? How? We destroyed them, Admiral, all of them. None of the enemy ships escaped from any of the encounters. The Kaleri Bridge fell silent. Commander Veltar checked his sensor readings again as if he could not believe what he was hearing. Lieutenant Kiris stared at the human captain with wide eyes. Captain Chun, said Zexthara slowly, are you saying that your primitive weapons were able to destroy Vorthak bioships? I would not call our weapons primitive, Admiral. Different, perhaps, but not primitive. We have been developing military technology for thousands of years. We may not have energy shields or plasma cannons, but we have learned to be very good at what we do. What exactly do you do? We specialize in kinetic weapons, Admiral. High-velocity projectiles, explosive devices, and electromagnetic systems. We also have extensive experience in fighting adaptive enemies. Zexthara did not understand. Adaptive enemies? Species or machines that learn from previous battles and change their tactics. We have fought several wars against enemies who could modify their behavior based on our strategies. We learned to counter their adaptations. Commander Veltar stepped forward. Captain Chun, the Vorthak can adapt to any weapon system within minutes. Their bioships literally grow new defenses during battle. How could kinetic weapons possibly work against them? Captain Chun smiled slightly. Commander, may I ask what kind of weapons you typically use against the Vorthak? Energy weapons, of course, plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion missiles. And they adapt to all of these? Yes, after a few hits, their ships develop armor that can absorb or deflect energy attacks. What about solid projectiles? Metal slugs accelerated to high velocity? Commander Veltar looked confused. We stopped using those weapons thousands of years ago. They are inefficient compared to energy weapons. Inefficient, perhaps, but the Vorthak have never encountered them, have they? Zexthara began to understand what the human was suggesting. You think they might not know how to defend against weapons they have never seen before? It is possible, Admiral. Our encounters with their scout ships suggest that their adaptive capabilities are based on previous experience. When they encountered weapons and tactics they had never seen before, they struggled to respond effectively. Tell me about these encounters. Captain Chun activated a display device on her ship. 3 weeks ago, a Vorthak scouting force of 12 bioships entered our star system. They approached our outer defense platforms using standard Vorthak tactics that we had observed through long-range sensors. The display showed a recording of the battle. Zexthara watched as the insect-like Vorthak ships moved toward what appeared to be primitive human space stations. The bioships were clearly expecting energy weapon attacks because they had already begun growing their adaptive armor. Instead, the human stations opened fire with streams of solid projectiles. The metal slugs punched through the Vorthak armor like it was made of paper. The bioships tried to adapt, but they could not grow armor thick enough to stop high-velocity metal without making themselves too heavy to move effectively. The Vorthak ships were destroyed in less than 10 minutes, Captain Chun explained. They never managed to adapt to our weapons. Commander Veltar was staring at the display. But how did you know this would work? We did not know for certain, Commander. But we had studied the Vorthak through long-range observation. We noticed that their adaptive armor was very effective against energy weapons but seemed to be designed for that specific threat. Admiral Zexthara felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. It was a small hope, but it was real. Captain Chun, are you suggesting that humanity would be willing to join our fight against the Vorthak? Admiral, the Vorthak scouts came to our system for a reason. Our intelligence analysis suggests that Earth is on their list of worlds to be consumed. Whether we help you or not, we will eventually have to fight them ourselves. But your forces are so small compared to what the Vorthak will bring against us. That is true, Admiral. 8 ships cannot defeat 1 million. But 8 ships might be able to teach your forces new ways to fight. Captain Chun paused and looked directly at Zexthara. Admiral, we would like to propose a joint operation. A small battle where our forces work together against a Vorthak target. If our methods prove effective on a larger scale, we can discuss expanding the cooperation. Zexthara thought about the proposal. It was risky to commit any of her remaining ships to an experimental battle. But if there was even a small chance that human tactics could work against the Vorthak, it was worth trying. What kind of target did you have in mind? Our intelligence indicates that there is a Vorthak supply convoy moving through the Zarian sector in 5 days, 20 bioships escorting several cargo vessels. Large enough to be a real test, but small enough that we could retreat if the operation fails. Commander Veltar whispered urgently to the Admiral. Admiral, we cannot risk our ships on an untested strategy. But Zexthara was thinking about the million-ship fleet that was coming to destroy her homeworld. Conventional tactics had failed for 3 years. Maybe it was time to try something unconventional. Captain Chun, what would you need from us for this operation? Primarily, we would need some of your ships to be temporarily modified with human weapon systems. We would also need detailed intelligence about Vorthic adaptive capabilities. Modified with primitive weapons? Yes, Admiral. We would need to install kinetic weapon systems and remove some of your energy weapons. It would be a significant change to your ships. Zexthara closed her eyes and thought about all the battles they had lost, all the worlds that had been consumed, all the people who had died. Then she thought about the 6 months they had left before the final attack. Captain Chen, I agree to your proposal. We will conduct a joint operation against the Zarian convoy. Thank you, Admiral. I believe this could be the beginning of a very important alliance. As the two fleets prepared to depart the meeting point, Zexthara wondered if she had just made the best decision of her career or the worst. But one thing was certain: for the first time since the war began, the Kaleri were going to try something the Vorthak had never seen before. The Tertius Nebula was a perfect place for an ambush. The thick clouds of gas and dust would hide the Allied fleet until the last moment, and the electromagnetic interference would make it hard for the Vorthak to call for help. Admiral Zexthara stood on the bridge of the Starlight Defender and watched her technicians make the final adjustments to the human weapon systems. It had taken 4 days to modify her ships for the joint operation. The humans had worked around the clock to install their kinetic weapons on 3 Kaleri cruisers. The process was more complicated than anyone had expected because human technology was so different from Kaleri systems. Admiral, the weapon modifications are complete, reported Chief Engineer Corvin. We have removed the plasma cannon arrays from the Starlight Defender, the Storm Runner, and the Nightwing. In their place, we have installed human kinetic weapon systems. How do they work? The humans call them railguns, Admiral. They use electromagnetic fields to accelerate metal projectiles to extremely high speeds. The projectiles are solid metal rods about the size of my arm, but they travel at nearly 30% of light speed when they leave the weapon. Zexthara looked at the strange new weapons mounted on her ship's hull. They were much smaller than plasma cannons and had a simple, brutal appearance. What about ammunition? Each weapon has a magazine that holds 200 projectiles. The humans brought enough spare ammunition for a long battle. Commander Veltar approached with a worried expression. Admiral, I still think this is a mistake. We are removing proven weapons and replacing them with technology that is thousands of years old. Old technology that is already proven effective. Against Vorthak scouts, the Admiral reminded him. Besides, we are keeping our energy weapons on the other ships in the fleet. If the human weapons fail, we can still fight conventionally. Captain Chin's voice came over the communication system. Admiral Zexthara, this is Captain Chun. My ships are in position at the edge of the nebula. Are your modified vessels ready? For the operation? We are ready, Captain. What is the status of the Vorthak convoy? Our long-range sensors show them approaching on schedule, 20 escort ships and 6 cargo vessels. They should reach the ambush point in approximately 1 hour. Understood. All ships move to attack positions. The combined human Kaleri fleet positioned itself within the nebula clouds. Zexthara had 12 ships under her command, while Captain Chun had brought 8 human vessels. Against 20 Vorthak bioships, the odds were roughly even in terms of numbers, but everyone knew that Vorthak ships were individually more powerful than anything the Alliance could field. Admiral, I am detecting the Vorthak convoy entering the nebula, reported Lieutenant Karras. They are moving in standard formation with the cargo ships in the center and the escorts spread around them. Can we identify the ship types? Yes, Admiral. Mostly Hunter-class bioships with 3 larger destroyer-class vessels providing heavy escort. The cargo ships appear to be carrying raw materials and possibly new biomechanical components. Zexthara studied the tactical display. The Vorthak formation was typical for a supply convoy. The escort ships would be alert but not expecting a major attack this deep in their territory. It was a good target for testing human tactics. Captain Chun, are you ready to begin the attack? Ready, Admiral. Remember, we want to engage the escorts first and leave the cargo ships for last. We need to see how the Vorthok react to our weapons before they can call for reinforcements. Understood? All ships, prepare for attack. Modified vessels will engage first, followed by support from conventional weapons. The Starlight Defender moved out of the nebula clouds along with the other 2 modified Kalari ships. The Vorthok escorts immediately detected them and began moving into battle formation. As expected, the bioships started growing their adaptive armor even before the first shots were fired. Target the lead destroyer, Chief Engineer. Let us see what your new weapons can do. Yes, Admiral. Railgun systems are charged and ready to fire. The first kinetic projectile left the Starlight Defender at incredible speed. It crossed the space between the ships so quickly that it was impossible to see. The metal rod struck the Vorthok destroyer in the center of its hull and punched completely through the bioship from front to back. The destroyer immediately began trying to heal the damage, but something was wrong. Instead of the rapid regeneration that usually followed damage to a Vorthok ship, the healing process was slow and chaotic. Green fluid leaked from the hole in the ship's hull. Direct hit, reported the targeting officer. The enemy ship is heavily damaged but still functional. Fire. Again, same target. 3 more kinetic projectiles hit the destroyer within seconds. Each one punched through the bioship's hull in a different place. The Vorthok vessel tried desperately to adapt, growing thicker armor around the impact points, but the armor could not stop projectiles traveling at such high speed. The destroyer is breaking apart, announced Commander Veltar with amazement in his voice. Admiral, it is not healing at all. Zexthara watched as the massive bioship split into several pieces and died. It was the first time she had ever seen a Vorthok ship completely destroyed in less than a minute. Target the next destroyer. Continue firing. The other Vorthok escorts were now moving to attack the modified Kalari ships, but they were having the same problem as their destroyed companion. Their adaptive armor, which had been so effective against energy weapons, could not stop high-velocity solid projectiles. Captain Chun's voice came over the communication system. Admiral, now would be a good time to observe something interesting. What do you mean? Watch what happens when the Vorthok try to board one of our ships. As if responding to her words, several small Vorthok boarding pods launched from one of the Hunter-class ships toward the human vessel Resilience. The pods attached themselves to the human ship's hull and began cutting through the armor with biomechanical tools. Captain, should we provide assistance? Asked Zexthara. Not yet. Admiral, this is part of the test. The Admiral watched as Vorthok biosoldiers entered the human ship through the holes they had cut. These creatures were some of the most dangerous weapons in the enemy arsenal. They could adapt to any environment and could interface directly with enemy computer systems to take control of ships. But after several minutes, something unexpected happened. Instead of the Vorthok taking control of the human ship, the boarding pods began detaching from the hull. The few biosoldiers that made it back to their pods looked confused and agitated. Captain Chun, what just happened? Admiral, the Vorthok boarding process relies on their ability to interface with our computer systems and adapt to our technology. But our ships use analog control systems and mechanical interfaces. The biosoldiers cannot connect to systems that are not digital. Commander. Veltar leaned forward. You mean their most dangerous weapon does not work against your ships? Exactly, Commander. They can cut through our hull, but once they are inside, they cannot take control of anything important. Our crew was able to drive them off with simple chemical weapons. The battle continued for another 30 minutes, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The human kinetic weapons were devastating against Vorthok bioships, and the traditional Vorthok boarding tactics were useless against human analog systems. By the end of the engagement, all 20 Vorthok escort ships had been destroyed. The cargo vessels, lacking any significant weapons, tried to flee but were easily captured by the faster human ships. Admiral, this is Captain Chun. I suggest we examine one of the cargo ships before we destroy it. We might learn something useful about Vorthak technology. Agreed, Captain. But we should be careful. Vorthak ships sometimes have self-destruct mechanisms. The boarding team that investigated the captured cargo ship made several important discoveries. The ship's biomechanical systems were incredibly advanced, but they were all designed around the assumption that the Vorthak would be fighting enemies who used energy-based technology. Chief Engineer Corvin, who had joined the boarding team, sent a report back to the Admiral. Admiral, this ship's defensive systems are amazing, but they are completely specialized. Every piece of armor, every adaptive mechanism, every healing system is designed to counter energy weapons, plasma attacks, and digital systems. What about their offensive capabilities? The same thing, Admiral. Their weapons are designed to overload energy shields and disrupt digital targeting systems. They have no weapons that are particularly effective against solid armor or analog systems. But the most important discovery came when the boarding team tried to interface with the cargo ship's computer systems. The Vorthak biomechanical computers could not understand human technology at all. When presented with analog circuits and mechanical controls, the alien systems became confused and began malfunctioning. It is as if they have never encountered this type of technology before, reported the chief engineer. Their adaptation protocols keep trying to find digital interfaces that do not exist. Admiral Zexthara realized what this meant. Chief Engineer, are you saying that the Vorthak Empire has never conquered a species that used analog technology? It appears that way, Admiral. Every adaptation they have developed is based on fighting digital civilizations. The implications were staggering. The Vorthak had conquered hundreds of worlds and dozens of species, but apparently every one of those civilizations had used advanced digital technology. The enemy had never encountered a species that still used mechanical and analog systems. Captain Chun requested a private communication with Admiral Zexthara after the battle. Admiral, this changes everything. The Vorthak are not invincible. They just appear invincible because every enemy they have fought has used the same basic types of technology. But Captain, humanity cannot fight a 1,000,000-ship fleet alone, no matter how effective your weapons are. You are right, Admiral. But what if we could modify more of your ships? What if we could teach your entire fleet to fight using human tactics and weapons? Zexthara thought about this possibility. It would take months to modify our entire fleet. We do not have that much time. We might not need to modify every ship, Admiral. We just need enough ships with kinetic weapons to cause confusion in the Vorthak ranks. Once their adaptive systems start malfunctioning, your conventional weapons might become more effective too. How do you figure that? Think about it, Admiral. The Vorthak have spent years developing defenses against energy weapons used by your people, but those defenses were developed while fighting an enemy who only used energy weapons. If we can disrupt their adaptation process with kinetic weapons, their existing defenses might not work properly anymore. Commander Veltar, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up. Captain, are you suggesting that we could confuse their defensive systems? Exactly, Commander. Military adaptation requires consistent patterns. If we can introduce inconsistent patterns into a battle, adaptive systems become much less effective. Admiral Zexthara looked at the tactical display showing the destroyed Vorthak escort fleet. 20 bioships that had seemed invincible just hours ago were now floating debris. All because they had encountered weapons and tactics they had never seen before. Captain Chun, how many Kaleri ships could your people modify before the final battle? With our current resources, maybe 50 ships. But Admiral, we would need access to your shipyards and manufacturing facilities. We would also need your people to learn how to maintain and operate the new weapons. And in return? In return, Admiral, we offer humanity's full commitment to this war. Every ship we have, every weapon we can build, every tactical innovation we can develop. Zexthara made her decision. Captain Chen, you have a deal. Let us return to Calari Prime and begin preparations. We have a war to win. As the combined fleet prepared to leave the Tertius Nebula, Admiral Zexthara felt something she had not experienced in 3 years of fighting the Vorthak. She felt like they had a real chance to survive. The enemy had made their first mistake. In the entire war, they had assumed that all civilizations would fight the same way. Now it was time to show them how wrong that assumption was. The news of the victory at Tertius Nebula spread through the Calari fleet faster than any official report could travel. Within hours of Admiral Zexthara's return to Calari Prime, every ship captain in the system knew that 20 Vorthak bioships had been destroyed without losing a single Allied vessel. For the first time in 3 years, Calari crews were talking about winning instead of just surviving. General Mordak called an emergency meeting of the High Command as soon as the admirals shuttle landed. The same room that had been filled with despair 3 weeks earlier was now buzzing with excitement and possibility. Admiral Zexthara, Captain Chun, please explain exactly what happened at Tertius, said the general as soon as everyone was seated. ZEX single quotes HARA activated the holographic display and showed the battle recordings. The room fell silent as the commanders watched Vorthak destroyers being torn apart by kinetic weapons. When the display showed bio-soldiers fleeing from a human ship in confusion, several officers actually cheered. The implications are clear, said Dr. Linara from the Science Division. The Vorthak have a fundamental weakness that we can exploit. Their entire military doctrine is based on fighting advanced digital civilizations. Admiral Tekron raised his hand. But can we really modify enough ships to make a difference? The final battle is still only 4 months away. Captain Chain stood up. Admiral, we have been working on that problem during the journey back to Calari Prime. We believe we can create a hybrid approach. That will be more efficient than completely converting your ships. What do you mean by hybrid approach? Instead of removing all your energy weapons, we can add kinetic weapon pods to your existing ships. This way, you keep your current firepower but gain the ability to confuse Vorthak adaptive systems. Chief Engineer Corvin, who had been studying human technology for the past week, added his analysis. The human kinetic weapons are actually quite simple to manufacture. We could begin mass production immediately using our existing industrial facilities. General Mordak leaned forward. How many ships could we modify with this hybrid approach? Captain Chun consulted a data tablet. With the full cooperation of your shipyards and manufacturing centers, we estimate we could modify approximately 300 ships in 4 months. That would give you enough hybrid vessels to disrupt Vorthak formations during the final battle. 300 ships with kinetic weapons against 1 million Vorthak vessels, mused Admiral Yansara. The odds are still terrible. But they are? Not hopeless, said Zexthara. We learned something else important during the battle. When Vorthak adaptive systems are confused by kinetic weapons, their defenses against energy weapons become much less effective. She activated another section of the battle recording. Watch what happens when we fired conventional plasma weapons at bioships that had already been hit by kinetic projectiles. The display showed the final phase of the Tertius battle. Calari. Ships using normal energy weapons were achieving much better results against Vorthak bioships that had been damaged by human kinetic weapons. The enemy armor that usually adapted quickly to plasma fire was slow to respond and less effective. The kinetic weapons disrupt their entire adaptive process, explained Captain Chun. Once their biomechanical systems are confused, they cannot adapt properly to any weapons. Dr. Linara was studying the data carefully. Captain, do you think this disruption effect would work on a larger scale? During a major fleet engagement? We believe so, Doctor. Our analysis suggests that Vorthak ships share information about adaptive responses through some kind of biological network. If we can confuse enough ships at the beginning of a battle, the confusion might spread to other ships in their fleet. Commander Veltar, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. This could actually work. If we position the hybrid ships correctly, we might be able to create chaos in their entire formation. General Mordak made his decision. Very well, we will commit all available resources to this project. Admiral Zextara, you will oversee the ship modifications. Captain Chen, we need your people to train our crews in human tactics and weapons operation. General, we will need more than just ship modifications, said Captain Chen. We also need to change how your fleet fights. Kaleri battle tactics are designed around energy weapons and long-range engagements. Kinetic weapons work best at shorter ranges with different timing. What are you suggesting? We need to train your fleet commanders in human combat doctrine. Our tactics are based on overwhelming concentrated firepower and rapid position changes. Very different from traditional Kaleri strategies, Admiral Zexthara nodded. Captain Chain is right. During the Tertius battle, I noticed that human ships moved and fought in ways I had never seen before. Their coordination was excellent, but their methods were completely foreign to us. How long would it take to retrain our commanders? At least 2 months of intensive training, Admiral. We would need to practice new formations, new timing, new communication protocols. General Mordek looked around the room. Do we have any other choice? No, sir, said Zexthora. Conventional tactics have failed for 3 years. If we want to survive the final battle, we need to fight in ways the Vorthok have never encountered. The next 4 months transformed the Kaleri military more completely than the previous century of gradual improvements. Human engineers worked alongside Kaleri technicians in shipyards throughout the Confederation. The sound of kinetic weapons being tested could be heard on dozens of worlds as crews learned to operate their new equipment. Captain Chun established a training academy on Kaleri Prime where human instructors taught Kaleri officers how to fight using Earth combat doctrine. The classes were intense and often frustrating for commanders who had spent their entire careers using energy-based tactics. The key difference, Captain Chun explained to a group of Kaleri admirals, is that human tactics assume the enemy will adapt to your weapons. Therefore, we focus on changing our approach faster than the enemy can respond. Admiral Curson, one of the older commanders, raised his hand. Captain, this requires us to constantly modify our battle plans during combat. Kaleri doctrine emphasizes careful planning and consistent execution, and Kaleri doctrine has been failing against the Vorthok for 3 years, Admiral. You need to learn to improvise. The training was not limited to ship commanders. Human Marines worked with Kaleri ground forces to develop new boarding and defensive tactics. The Kaleri had always relied on energy barriers and digital security systems to protect their ships from boarders. Now they were learning to use mechanical locks, chemical weapons, and analog communication systems. The idea is to make your ships as confusing as possible for Vorthek bio-soldiers, explained Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, a human marine instructor. Every system they encounter should be something they have never seen before. Meanwhile, the ship modification program was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Human kinetic weapons were simpler to manufacture than Kaleri energy weapons, and the hybrid approach meant that existing ships could be upgraded without complete reconstruction. Chief Engineer Corvin reported to Admiral Zexthara every week on the program's progress. We have completed modifications on 240 ships so far, Admiral. The remaining 60 ships should be finished within the next month. How are the crews adapting to the new weapons? Better than expected, Admiral. The kinetic weapons are actually easier to operate than plasma cannons. No complex energy calculations or heat management required. Point and shoot. What about ammunition supplies? That was a concern initially, but human manufacturing techniques are very efficient. We can produce kinetic projectiles much faster than we can manufacture energy weapon components. The most significant breakthrough came when Dr. Lenara's science team discovered that they could improve the kinetic weapons even further by studying Vorthok bioship samples from the Tertius battle. Admiral, we found something interesting about Vorthok armor, she reported during one of the weekly briefings. Their adaptive biometal is extremely effective against energy attacks because it can absorb and redistribute energy. But it actually becomes weaker when it tries to adapt to physical impacts. What does that mean for our weapons? It means we can design kinetic projectiles specifically to exploit this weakness. We have developed new ammunition that becomes more effective the more the Vorthek armor tries to adapt to it. Captain Chen was impressed by this development. Doctor, you have turned our weapons from a surprise attack into a permanent advantage. Even if the Vorthek learn about kinetic weapons, they will not be able to develop effective defenses. As the final month before the expected Vorthek attack approached, Admiral Zextara conducted a series of large-scale training exercises to test the new hybrid fleet. The results were encouraging but also revealed areas that needed improvement. The good news is that our kinetic weapons are devastatingly effective, she reported to General Morduk. The bad news is that coordinating 300 ships using completely different tactics is extremely challenging. What kind of coordination problems are you seeing? Timing, mostly. Human tactics require very precise coordination between kinetic and energy weapon attacks. If the timing is wrong, the weapons interfere with each other instead of supporting each other. Captain Chun had a solution for this problem. Admiral, we need to restructure your fleet organization. Instead of traditional Kaleri formations, we should organize ships into mixed human Kaleri battle groups. How would that work? Each battle group would have human ships providing kinetic weapon support and tactical coordination, with Kaleri ships providing heavy energy weapon firepower. The human crews would handle the timing and coordination because they are trained in these tactics. Admiral Zextara approved the reorganization, and the results were immediately obvious. Mixed battle groups performed much better than pure Kaleri formations using hybrid tactics. But the most important test came when long-range scouts reported that the Vorthek Grand Fleet had begun moving toward Kaleri space. Over 1 million bioships were traveling in a formation so large that it would take hours for the entire fleet to pass through a single star system. They will arrive in 2 weeks, reported the chief intelligence officer. Our latest estimates suggest they have even more ships than we originally thought. The Grand Fleet may contain as many as 1.2 million vessels. General Morduk called the final planning meeting. Admiral Zextara, Captain Chun, are we ready? Zextara looked at the tactical displays showing the positions of the modified Kaleri fleet. 300 ships with kinetic weapons, 50 human vessels, 4,000 conventional Kaleri ships, against more than 1 million Vorthek bioships. General, we are as ready as we can be. The hybrid ships are fully operational, the crews are trained in human tactics, and we have enough kinetic ammunition for a long battle. Captain Chun, what is your assessment? General, we have given the Kaleri the tools they need to win, but the final battle will depend on execution, timing, and a little bit of luck. General Morduk nodded. Then we will make our stand at Kaleri Prime. If we lose, at least we will lose fighting with every advantage we could gain. Admiral Zextara looked around the room at the faces of her fellow commanders. 2 months ago, these same people had been preparing for extinction. Now they were preparing for the largest space battle in galactic history, and they actually believed they could win. The Vorthak were about to discover that their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their ability to adapt to any enemy had made them overconfident. They had never faced an enemy who could exploit their adaptation process itself. In 2 weeks, the war would end one way or another. But for the first time since the conflict began, the Kaleri fleet was not just hoping to survive. They were planning to achieve something no species had accomplished in 3 years of Vorthek expansion. They were planning to win. The Vorthek Grand Fleet arrived at Kaleri Prime like a plague of living metal and flesh. Admiral Zextara stood on the bridge of the Starlight Defender and watched through the viewing screen as more than 1 million bioships dropped out of hyperspace. The enemy formation stretched across space for millions of kilometers, blotting out the stars with their dark hulls. Admiral, I am reading 1.3 million Vorthak vessels, reported Lieutenant Kiris, her voice barely steady. The lead ships are entering the outer system now. The sight was terrifying even for crews who had been preparing for this moment for months. The largest Vorthak ships were the size of small moons, covered in thousands of weapon pods that pulsed. with organic light. Smaller bioships swarmed around the giants like insects around a corpse. "All ships, this is Admiral Zexthara," she announced over the fleet communication system. "Today we make our stand. Today we show the galaxy that the Kalari Confederation will not die quietly." All battle groups moved to assigned positions. The modified Kalari fleet began moving into formation around Kalari Prime. 300 ships with human kinetic weapons spread out among 4,000 conventional vessels. Captain Chun's 50 human ships took position at key points where they could provide tactical coordination. "Captain Chen, are your forces ready?" asked Zexthara over the private command channel. "Ready, Admiral." "Remember, we need to hit them with kinetic weapons first to disrupt their adaptive systems. Once they are confused, your energy weapons will be much more effective." "Understood." All hybrid battle groups prepare for initial kinetic strikes. The Vorthak fleet continued its approach with the confidence of predators who had never failed to consume their prey. At the center of their formation, the massive queen ship pulsed with biomechanical energy. Admiral Zexthara knew that destroying that ship was the key to victory, but it was protected by thousands of escort vessels. "The enemy is entering weapons range," announced Commander Veltar. "Vorthak bioships are beginning to grow adaptive armor." "Perfect," said Captain Chun. "They are preparing for the same kind of battle they have fought 100 times before. Begin the attack." The first wave of kinetic projectiles streaked across space at 30% of light speed. The Vorthak ships, expecting energy weapons, had grown armor designed to absorb and deflect plasma fire. The solid metal rods punched through their defenses like they were made of paper. Dozens of Vorthak bioships exploded as kinetic rounds tore through their vital systems. The enemy fleet immediately tried to adapt, but their biomechanical systems had never encountered this type of attack before. The adaptive armor began growing thicker, but this made the ships slower and less maneuverable. "Direct hits on 47 enemy vessels," reported the targeting officer. "Multiple ships destroyed, others heavily damaged." But the Vorthak fleet was so large that losing 50 ships barely affected their overall strength. The bioships began returning fire with their own weapons, streams of living metal that could burn through energy shields and consume enemy vessels. "Incoming fire," called Commander Veltar. All ships evasive maneuvers. The Kalari fleet scattered according to human tactical doctrine, avoiding the concentrated Vorthak fire while maintaining their own attack patterns. This was completely different from traditional Kalari tactics, which relied on holding formation and trading firepower. Second wave, fire kinetic weapons. Ordered ZEX single quotes to HAR. Another volley of solid projectiles slammed into the Vorthak formation. This time, the enemy ships tried a different adaptation, growing reactive armor that exploded outward when hit. But the kinetic rounds were moving too fast and hit too hard for reactive armor to stop them. "Admiral, the Vorthak are trying something new," reported Dr. Linara from the science station. "Their ships are linking together into larger formations and sharing adaptive information." Captain Chin's voice came over the communication system. "Admiral, now is the time to use your energy weapons. Hit the ships that have been damaged by kinetic fire. All conventional ships target damaged Vorthak vessels with energy weapons." The plasma cannons and particle beams of the regular Kalari fleet opened fire on bioships that had already been hit by kinetic weapons. The results were devastating. The Vorthak adaptive armor, confused by the kinetic attacks, could not properly defend against the energy weapons. "The bioships are not adapting correctly," observed Commander Veltar with excitement. "Their defensive systems are malfunctioning." "Keep firing," ordered Zexthara. "All ships, concentrate fire on targets that have been hit by kinetic weapons." The battle raged across the Kalari system for hours. The Vorthak fleet was so large that even destroying hundreds of ships made little difference to their overall numbers, but the human Kalari tactics were working. Enemy bioships that should have adapted to the attacks within minutes were being destroyed by weapons they should have been immune to, but the Vorthak were not helpless. They began changing their tactics. sending smaller ships to attack the human vessels while their larger ships focused on the modified Kaleri cruisers. They had identified the kinetic weapons as the source of their problems. "Admiral, human ship Resilience is under heavy attack," reported Lieutenant Kiris. "They are requesting assistance." Battle Group 7 moved to support the Resilience. Ordered Zexthara. The battle was becoming more chaotic as both sides adapted to each other's tactics. The Vorthek were learning to avoid ships with kinetic weapons, while the human Kaleri Alliance was learning to protect their most valuable vessels. But then something unexpected happened. A group of Vorthek bioships attempted to board the human vessel Enterprise using their standard boarding tactics. The bio-soldiers entered the human ship through hull breaches, expecting to take control of the vessel systems. Instead, the boarding attempt turned into a disaster for the Vorthek. The bio-soldiers found themselves in a ship full of analog controls, mechanical systems, and chemical weapons. Their ability to interface with enemy technology was completely useless. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Enterprise," came a transmission. "The Vorthek boarding parties are retreating. They cannot understand our systems at all." But more importantly, the confused bio-soldiers began transmitting their confusion back to the main Vorthek fleet through their biological communication network. Other bioships started receiving contradictory information about human technology, which caused their own adaptive systems to malfunction. "Admiral, something strange is happening to the Vorthek fleet," reported Dr. Linara. "Their coordination is breaking down. Ships are acting independently instead of as a unified force." Captain Chun realized what was happening. "Admiral, the biological communication network that makes the Vorthek so effective is also their weakness. The confusion from our analog systems is spreading through their entire fleet." Zexthara saw the opportunity immediately. "All ships, press the attack. Target the largest bioships while their systems are malfunctioning." The Alliance fleet surged forward, focusing their combined firepower on the massive Vorthek command ships. Without proper coordination, the bioships could not support each other effectively. Ships that should have been nearly invincible were being destroyed by coordinated attacks. "We are breaking through their outer formations," reported Commander Veltar. "The path to the Queen ship is clearing." But the Queen ship itself was not helpless. The massive vessel, larger than any other ship in the battle, began moving toward Kaleri Prime. Its intention was clear: if the Vorthek could not win the space battle, they would land on the planet and consume it directly. "We cannot let that ship reach the planet," said Zexthara. "All available ships, intercept the Queen ship." The final phase of the battle became a desperate race. Every human ship and every modified Kaleri vessel that could still fight converged on the Queen ship, firing kinetic weapons and energy weapons as fast as they could. The massive bioship fought back with weapons that could destroy cruisers with single shots. Captain Chin's ship, the Resilience, led the attack on the Queen ship's hull. "Admiral, we need to get boarding parties inside that ship. If we can disrupt its control systems, the entire Vorthek fleet might collapse." "Captain, our boarding shuttles cannot survive the weapons fire around that ship. Then we will have to ram through, Admiral. The Resilience can take more damage than your ships. We will create a breach that your Marines can use." "Captain, that is a suicide mission." "Maybe, Admiral. But if we do not stop that ship, your planet dies anyway." The Resilience accelerated toward the Queen ship at maximum speed. Vorthek defensive fire tore through the human vessel's armor, but the ship kept flying. At the last moment, Captain Chun activated a chemical explosive device that had been installed in the ship's cargo bay. The explosion tore a massive hole in the Queen ship's hull, but it also destroyed the Resilience completely. Captain Chun and her crew died in the blast, but they had created the opening that the Alliance needed. "All Marine shuttles, assault." "The breach," ordered Admiral Zexthara. "Human and Kaleri Marines, board that ship and destroy its command center." The boarding parties that entered the Queen ship carried chemical weapons, mechanical tools, and analog communication devices. The Vorthak biosoldiers inside the ship had never encountered enemies like this. Every weapon the Marines used was something the Vorthak had never seen before. Sergeant Rodriguez, leading the human Marines, reported from inside the Queen ship. Admiral, we have reached what appears to be the command center. It is some kind of organic brain connected to the ship systems. Can you destroy it? Yes, Admiral. We brought chemical explosives specifically designed to destroy biological targets. The explosion that destroyed the Queen ship's command center was felt throughout the Vorthak fleet. The massive vessel stopped moving and began to break apart. More importantly, the biological communication network that connected all Vorthak ships went silent without the Queen mind to coordinate them. The individual Vorthak bioships became confused and disorganized. They had spent so many years as parts of a collective intelligence that they could not function independently. Some ships fled toward the edge of the system. Others simply stopped moving and floated helplessly in space. Admiral, the Vorthak fleet is in complete disarray, reported Commander Veltar with amazement. They are not fighting back anymore. All ships, continue the attack. Destroy as many enemy vessels as you can before they recover. The Alliance fleet spent the next several hours hunting down and destroying Vorthak bioships that could no longer defend themselves properly. By the time the battle ended, more than half of the enemy fleet had been destroyed, and the survivors were fleeing into deep space. Admiral Zexthara stood on her bridge and watched the wreckage of the Vorthak Grand Fleet drifting through the Kaleri system. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were now broken and lifeless. The war that had lasted 3 years was finally over. Admiral, we are receiving communications from Vorthak ships throughout the galaxy, reported Lieutenant Kiris. They are reporting that their collective consciousness has been severed. Many ships are requesting surrender. What should we tell them? Zexthara thought about all the worlds that had been consumed, all the people who had died, all the years of fear and desperation. But she also thought about Captain Chun and her crew, who had died to save a planet they had never seen before. Tell them that the Kaleri Confederation accepts their surrender. Tell them that the age of the Vorthak Empire is over. As the news of victory spread throughout Kaleri space, Admiral Zexthara realized that everything had changed because of one simple truth. The Vorthak had spent centuries perfecting their ability to adapt to advanced enemies. But they had never considered that sometimes the most powerful weapon was the simplest one they had never encountered. The war was over, but the alliance between humanity and the Kaleri would continue. Together, they would rebuild the galaxy and ensure that no species would ever again face extinction alone.